Hey everyone, today I just want to give you an update on Crossroads Cares. I know it's been a couple of weeks. So just know that we've had 385 care packages that have been delivered since we began. And that is incredible. It's touching the lives of over 1,500 people. And I know very much it's because of everything that you have so generously offered. You've given food to us, you've given your time, and you've prayed over the families that receive these care packs. And that is what makes this a huge win for our community. So I just want to say thank you so very much. Now, you might be wondering why we're here at the Red Deer Hospital today. We are talking nurses. So I'm sure we've all seen the key role that nurses play during this pandemic. And I know many of us have seen those touching videos where people will step out in their neighborhood onto the streets or maybe under their balconies and they clang their pots and pans to say thank you to the nurses. I know many of us have had that personal experience with nurses where we get to experience their compassion and their giftedness and their dedication in those times that we most need them. So I had the privilege to speak with Biro just recently, and Biro is a nurse. She is also a member of Crossroads Church, but she's also the vice president of Nurses Christian Fellowship International. This is an incredible organization that spans the globe, and it's all the Christian nurses in the area, so it's awesome. And because of her role, Anne actually has contact with 70 different countries, nurses in those 70 countries. And so I asked her recently if she could just share a little bit about what it is that she's hearing from nurses around the globe. This is a little bit of what she had to say.
And it's so great to see you. Thank you so much for spending some time with us. Why don't we just start right off in Canada? What have you been hearing from the nurses here in our own country? What do they think?
Well, at the start of the pandemic, there was a tremendous amount of stress. Stress because of expecting so many more people to come in, but also stress from personal fear of death and what it might mean to you as a nurse working and being in contact with people. So I asked my friend who works in a unit actually in Alberta, and she was saying that she was surprised, although her colleagues were stressed and worried about death for themselves or their family members, they also told her that they were already going the other way, and so they weren't interested in spiritual things. And so just learning that so many nurses in our healthcare system, they give, but they don't really have hope or a sense of fullness of life. It makes me sometimes wonder what kind of message they've received or heard, because Christian life should be one that's full. And so I think we need to remember them in prayer and in their fears. The other thing, especially at the start of the pandemic, is there was a tremendous amount of stress in the workplace. Protocols kept changing. A lot of things were changing. And one of the nurses in Alberta, she told me that at one point she was very frustrated with her superior because she felt she was being asked to do something that was unsafe. And it was in the midst of all the changes, and she was starting to feel angry and bitter. But then she felt God whisper in her ear, telling her, I love that other nurse too. And she's anxious and stressed, but you don't have to be affected. And she said being part of a Christian community and praying and being a recipient of grace made her more open to hear what God was speaking to her. And I think we need to support our Christian nurses in that way too, that they can be light and salt in their places of work. There's another aspect in Alberta that I hadn't thought about. With the pandemic, a lot of services are shifted. And so operations are shut down or other services aren't available. And what happens is that people with permanent contracts get bumped, and people who are casual lose their jobs. And so we've got nurses sitting at home, one, who are suffering financially because they don't have work, and two, they'd really like to be there helping, but there's just not a job place for them.
Mm-hmm. So true. That's a great perspective. It's hard to hear sometimes, but it's true. I know you've got lots of connections all over the world, so why don't you share some perspectives from other parts of the world?
I had a friend, colleague from Zambia who was telling me about nurses in their country. She said that they're being sent to areas for testing, and a lot of the nurses are quite fearful. They don't have the personal protective equipment that we have here. They also don't have much for salary. It's a pittance, less than the average wage and they don't have the same respect. And sometimes there's a whole debate in their mind. Do I go into work? Do I fulfill my duty? Or do I put my family at risk because I'm at risk? And so it's really tough for many of them in Africa. You know, we've heard stories as well from India and Mexico and other parts where there's fake news saying that the healthcare workers who are doing the testing or who are doing follow-ups are actually transmitting the disease. And so there's been violence. Nurses have been beaten. Even in New York, nurses had their tires slashed. So some people are so fearful of nurses, it puts nurses' lives at risk. You know, in addition to that, there are people on the front lines. There's a young nurse in the Philippines who works in the critical care unit, and they started to see a lot more people coming in and a lot more deaths. And he says, it is just hard. Where is hope? But being connected to a Christian community, he said, has made the difference in him being able to continue and also in being able to see good stories in the midst of all the suffering that they're facing.
Awesome. And thank you so much. So great to hear just different perspectives and to help us just understand more of what's going on in the nursing world. And we will be praying for nurses. And so thank you so much for the great wisdom and experience that you share with us tonight. Have a great day. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
So interesting to see the diversity of experiences of nurses around the world. This week, I'm asking that we pray for nurses and the medical world altogether. I know Anne has given us these 3 points, that we'd pray for their protection, for their relationships, and that they would experience peace and hope during this difficult time. So please join me in praying. I know there's not a day that goes by that we would want to experience without nurses in the world. So let's lift them up and just ask that God would give them extra strength during this time especially. Thanks so much, you guys.